Children are often asked the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'm sure that you've not only asked kids this question, you have been asked yourself when you were growing up. And if you were like me, when slum books were still the in thing, you probably written down your answer also in a slum book when the question was brought up. What do you want to be when you grow up? Now, as a child, I had two ambitions. The first one was to be an airplane pilot. This was because I was fascinated with airplanes. And although I never became a pilot at all, okay, but if you have traveled with me before, and if you have been paying attention to my behavior when we're in the pre-departure area of the airport, occasionally you will see me standing up. I would go near the windows, I would gaze out at the runway, look at the airplanes. Why? Because I'm fascinated with airplanes. Now, the other ambition that I had was to be a firefighter. Why? It's simply because I like playing with fire, that's all. Okay? It had nothing to do with saving lives. I just like to play with fire. But of course, I cannot be an arsonist, that's a crime. So you might as well be a firefighter. However, when I became a teenager, realism sets in. And so I said to myself, I want to become a businessman, which was a very typical expectation for Chinese Filipinos in my generation. And so when I entered college, naturally I took up commerce. I was given a couple of choices like psychology, computer science, dentistry. But I didn't like the idea of being a dentist because I feared being a dentist, the idea of pulling other people's teeth. Okay. Computer science, there was a catch. If I wanted to take computers, if I wanted to buy my first computer back then, I had to study computer science. That was the condition. I said, that's not a fair condition. Okay, so I didn't agree with that. Psychology, okay, I seriously considered it, but my first choice in school was business management. So I naturally took business management while in college. And then after college, I worked for a number of years in different companies. And I had three objectives. One, I wanted to gain work experience. Number two, I wanted to accumulate capital so that if I go into business, I have something to work with. And third, I wanted to develop connections. So I had a goal. I had a direction where I wanted to go. And I even said to myself that by the time I reach 30, I should have made at least $1 million already. As in $1 million in the bank, not $1 million in working capital, but $1 million in the bank. And so that was my goal. And there were markers that indicated that I was moving on this particular path. What were the markers? First of all, of course, finishing business in college. Then, of course, the work experience, those were markers. Then, reaching a certain level of savings so that I could start a business. And then, of course, getting to know lots of people. Especially when I worked in a bank, I got to know a lot of people. People in the hardware business, people in retail, all kinds of people. However, God changed the direction of my life from becoming a businessman to serving full-time in the ministry. However, what I want to point out is that I had a goal. And to reach that goal, I had certain markers, or we could say certain achievements in order to reach that goal. Now, without a goal in life, we drift. We don't know where to go. There are many today who don't know what to aim for in their lives. Such that anything that comes their way, incidentally or accidentally, if it's good, then it becomes a goal. That means if I achieve this by accident or just incidentally, then it's good enough. It's sort of like, when people throw a dart on a blank wall, and then they draw a bullseye, where the dart landed. Also, we drift when we allow others to dictate what we should do rather than we decide according to God's leading what we should be doing. And so, very often, we end up being clueless about where we want to go or where we're headed. But on the other hand, there are some who have goals, but they may be the wrong goals in life. They may be goals that don't honor God. And all the aspirations, all the ambition centers on self. You aim for fame, you aim for fortune, instead of seeking the kingdom of God. Wrong goals in life may make you happy for a time being. But when you reach it, when you reach what you're aspiring for, very often you begin to say to yourself, is this all there is to life? Is this all there is to life? Next Sunday, we'll be starting our study series entitled Transform. And for 7 weeks, we're looking at 7 areas of life that needs transformation. Now, in each of the 7 areas that we will be examining, you will be making certain goals for each area. What do you want to achieve in the next 3 months? And so the challenge for us is that as we go through the series, we will carefully examine ourselves and consider, okay, what are the things I want to achieve? Like, for example, in my spiritual health, what do I want to achieve in the next 3 months? Like, in the next 3 months, I want to be able to memorize how many verses. Or probably you could say, I want to finish a certain book in the Bible or study a certain book in the Bible. Or for example, physical health. In 3 months' time, I want to be able to lose 5 pounds. Okay? Or maybe be able to run in a 10K fun run, okay, in a time of around 30 minutes. Something like that. Okay? So, we want to be able to set goals for our lives for the next 3 months, and not just maybe the next 3 months, but even for life. What are the goals we want to set to improve ourselves? Now, transformation is always the work of God. I believe that it is God who transforms us. However, there are personal responsibilities that we have to do to prepare for transformation. And the most important responsibility is that we have to set goals in life that points towards transformation, towards the transformation or the change that God desires in each of us. What are the things that God has placed in our hearts so that we can reach a certain goal, a certain transformation or change that we aspire for and God has placed in our hearts. Now this morning, I would like for us to spend time to talk about setting goals. Setting goals. I want to talk about goals that are not just worthwhile, but I want to talk about goals that have significance for all eternity. And so we're going to look at the life of the Apostle Paul and look at the goals that he set for himself. And what can we learn from his goal and his pursuit to fulfill that goal? And so we're looking at Philippians 3. It's a very familiar passage for most of us here. And from this passage, we will learn about how Paul set a goal that was worth pursuing and had eternal significance. And we will contrast this with his goals and achievements before he became a believer. So let me first of all set the context. Now, when Paul wrote Philippians, this was the time when he was sitting in prison, and he was most likely imprisoned in Rome sometime around AD 59 to 61. Now, much earlier, he had visited Philippi during the start of his second missionary journey. And it seemed that he had this special bond or connection with the church because, according to this letter, the church financially supported him. And if you know Paul actually never expected or demanded this from them. Now, what were the reasons why Paul wrote this letter. First of all, he wrote this letter to express his thanks, to express his gratitude for the financial support. Then second, he was encouraging them concerning his circumstance, that they don't need to worry about his being in prison, because the Philippians were thinking, oh no, Paul is in prison. What's going to happen to the work of the gospel? And so he was telling them, don't worry, the gospel will continue to be proclaimed. Okay, so you be joyful in the circumstance. And then he warns them against false teachings, because false teachings were beginning to arise in the church. And Philippians 3 actually falls into that segment about heresies. It's a warning against heresy. Now, Paul here talked about how he used to follow wrong teaching, of how he aimed for things that never really mattered. And so he mentioned a couple of things in his letter. First of all, he talks about his pedigree. He was a pure Hebrew from the tribe of Benjamin. It's sort of like, for some of us who are, we could say, pure Chinese, some of us could trace our ancestry all the way to the town or the village that our forefathers lived in ancient China. That's why very often someone may ask you a question in Chinese, that means where was your village or ancestral town? Okay. So Paul, he could trace his lineage. He said, I'm from the line of Benjamin, and I am a Hebrew of Hebrews. Okay. Then he also talked about his party affiliation. He was a member of the Pharisees. Okay. And then he also talked about his zeal, that he persecuted the church. He also talked about his being righteous, that he was a faultless person when it comes to the requirements of the law. That means that he was law-abiding. And so his goal, if you look at all of these, his goal before he became a follower of Christ was actually self-promotion and self-exaltation. Okay. Because if you look at what he mentioned, he talks about his identity, okay, to which group of people he belonged to. He talks about his achievement. He was a Pharisee, because you cannot just become a Pharisee. Okay, you have to go through higher levels of education. And in fact, in the book of Acts, it was mentioned that Paul studied under one of the great teachers named Gamaliel. Then, of course, he talked about his excitement for his religion. However, all of these things became worthless when he came to know Jesus Christ. And so there was a change in the direction where he was headed. Instead of exalting himself, instead of thinking about his status in society, he now had something else to pursue, something that was significant, something worthwhile. And what was that? It was to know Christ. If you read the passage, you'll see, I want to know Christ. That was his goal. That was why he was willing to forsake everything else so that he could attain this one goal. Okay, so that's the first thing that we can learn here. That our lifelong goal, just like Paul, should be to glorify God through our deeper intimacy with Christ. To glorify God through deeper intimacy with Christ. Again, verse 10, it says, I want to know Christ and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his suffering, of sharing in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death. Now, Paul's desire to know Christ should not be misunderstood to simply mean that he wanted to know Christ just up here. Factual knowledge. Now, what is factual knowledge? Factual knowledge is the kind of knowledge that we store in our brains. The kind of knowledge that comes from studying, from listening to messages or lectures, attending classes, seminars. Okay? Now, none of these are wrong. Okay? None of them are wrong. In fact, we should spend time to understand the Bible. We should spend time to study the Bible. We should spend time to know more about Jesus. However, we have to confess that mere intellectual or factual knowledge cannot translate to the moving or the changing of the heart automatically. Okay? Because many people can have a lot of this, but they don't have this. Okay? That's why in Chinese there's this one expression where it says that the distance between the head and the heart is a foot. So when someone tells you that that what you know is a foot away from your heart, it means that it hasn't translated to something significant yet in your life. It's not yet something you accepted in your heart. Now, what Paul was saying was that he wanted a knowledge where he was growing deeper, more personal, and having a more a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. This was what Paul was saying when he said, I wanted to know Christ. He wanted to grow deeper in the relationship. He also mentioned he wanted to experience for himself how God is working in his life. Meaning experiencing his suffering, experiencing the power of his resurrection, and things like that. So, here, Paul was saying, my goal is to glorify God by knowing Christ, to know Him intimately. Now, if you were to look at all the other letters of Paul, you'll find him stating some other goals that seem different. But actually, they are in harmony with Philippians 3. Let me show them to you. In Romans 8:29, he said, be predestined to be conformed to the image of His Son. 2 Corinthians 3:18, and we all are being transformed into His image. Then Ephesians 4:13, to become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. So what's the connection? I want to know Christ, the power of His resurrection, and the fellowship of His suffering. What's the connection of Philippians 3 and all these other verses? What Paul here is saying is he wants to know Christ so he would become like Him in his thinking, in his attitude, in his way of doing things, in how he treats people. And so that's what it means when he says, I want to know Christ. I want to know Christ to the extent that He changes my life, that He transforms me, that He makes me to become like Jesus. That's what it means when he says, I want to know Christ. And in doing so, when he wants to conform to the image of Christ, then he is aiming to glorify God. Now this is completely opposite to what he aimed for in his life before. Because before he was only thinking about himself, he only thought about his accomplishments in life. Here he was now saying, my aim in life is to please God. My aim is to know Jesus Christ intimately, such that He changes my life so that I may honor Him, I may glorify Him. And so this, let me propose to you, is the goal that is worth pursuing. And not only that, it is sensible. It is a sensible goal. Why? Because consider what Jesus has done for you. He went to the cross to die for your sins and my sins. And then He rose from the dead so that we who believe can experience eternal life. He has done so much for us. And so it becomes a goal that is worthwhile to pursue in light of who He is and what He has done for us. Another way of saying this would be, we aim to become like Christ in our character and in our priorities. That means I want to see changes in my life, in the sense that before, my behavior, my character is like this. Right now, I want to be like this character. The other is priority. Before, I only thought about myself. Now, I want to think about God. I want to do the things of God. And of course, I want to care about others. And so, this goal, we could say, determines everything else that we do in life. Not just in the spiritual realm, but in all areas of life. Reverend Edmund Chan was right when he said these words. He said, in this world, we are overcommitted but underconnected, overburdened but under-nourished. Then he said this, the one thing that matters is intimacy with God through His Word. Okay, the one thing that matters is intimacy with God. And so, we can say this, when we desire to know Jesus Christ deeply, it determines everything else that we do in life. For example, if I want to be of use to God further in the ministry, it will influence certain decisions in my life. For example, how well do I take care of my body? How do I feed my mind? How I manage and deal with my emotions? How do I use my finances? How do I treasure and value my relationships? And so you see, that one thing, to know Jesus Christ, will determine everything else that I will do in this life. So let's ask ourselves the question, is our goal here on earth all about glorifying God by becoming intimate, by becoming closer to Jesus? Or is our goal in life still about ourselves? What can I gain out of this life? Is that our goal? Let me just say this, don't settle for that which is worthless and temporal in value. Instead, go for that which truly matters, that which is eternal. And that is for us to grow in our relationship with Jesus, to become more like Him, so that we may glorify His name. That should be our goal in life. Second, I want to talk now about our past. With regards to our past, don't let it become a hindrance to our goal. Don't let it become a hindrance to our goal. Paul earlier mentioned a lot about his past. Now, when we're dealing with the past, we have to remember this. If they are not dealt properly or treated properly, our past could become hindrances to our goals. Now, when you talk about the past, when you talk about maybe experiences you had in the past, and if those experiences help you to become a better person right now, then by all means, you can always reflect on the past to help you. However, sometimes the past can become a hindrance. What do I mean? Consider this. In verses 4 to 6, again, Paul talks about his heritage. He says that he's a Jew through and through. He could trace his lineage to Benjamin. He was well educated, a member of the party of the Pharisees. He kept the law to the letter. So Paul was an accomplished person. And because of that, he could have easily settled for what he had attained without striving for more in his former faith. But instead, we saw him also going to the extreme. He began to persecute the church in order to defend his faith. Okay. So we find that here, he could have easily settled and said, okay, I'm like this, I'm like that, okay, I'm content. I'm a made man. But then when he became a follower of Jesus Christ, he could also have faced a similar temptation. Because if you consider his life, he accomplished a lot of things also. He planted a lot of churches, discipled a lot of people, he led many to Christ. That's just to name a few. But here, he was not content with just doing all of those things. Instead, what we find is he longed for more. And we mentioned that already. His goal was to glorify God, to continually glorify God. And so Paul here did not allow himself to just, reminisce, enjoy his past accomplishments. But he kept on looking forward, saying, I want to know Christ. I want to grow in my faith. I want to be more intimate with Jesus. Now, the same is true also with his sinful past. Because in 1 Timothy 1:15, Paul declared something about Jesus dying for sinners, and then he goes on to say, of which I am the worst. I'm the worst of sinners. And yet, he also said that although he was the worst of sinners, he had experienced the mercy of God. Now, Paul could have wallowed in guilt. Why? Because remember, he persecuted the church. Okay? And most likely, he may have committed murder in the process also, whether directly or indirectly. He could have thought, how can God use someone like me? I have persecuted the Lord's church. I have insulted the Lord's name. So he could have thought, I'm no use to God. And yet here he says, I've experienced the mercy of God. I have been freed. So I can now move forward to know the Lord more intimately. Our past accomplishments, as well as our past sins, our past failures, can sometimes hinder us from the goal of glorifying God. In one extreme, we may choose to glory in the past, as if there's nothing else we need to accomplish in life. On the other side, we allow self-pity to paralyze us from rising up and start moving again. There are people who still talk about how they followed the Lord back then, how they served Him faithfully in the past. But at the present, they're no longer aspiring for greater heights in their walk with God. There are people who see themselves as being worthless right now because of their past sins. That they are thinking, God can't use me. And so they dare not follow God closely. Paul's attitude with regards to the past, whether it was accomplishment or sin, was that he recognized that he needed to move forward. And so all of us, we need to stop our past, whether they be accomplishments or failures and sins, from bothering us and hindering us from following Christ. Yes, we can learn lessons from them, but never let them become a hindrance to you from following Jesus Christ. Because what matters right now is we realize we have not yet arrived at the goal. As well as that there's always mercy available when we fail and when we sin. So don't let the past hinder you from moving forward to the goal. Maybe to give you an illustration of this, I always think about how some businesses at the start they do well and then they fail. Do you know why they fail? It's because they don't look forward. And instead, they say to themselves, well, as long as the business makes money for me, I get to draw a monthly income out of it, I'm happy. They're not forward thinking, like, oh, I want this business to grow, I want to have franchises, I want to have the biggest mall that I can build and all of that stuff. Okay. I want to expand my product line. I want to be able to cover the whole of the Philippines. Okay. very often we get stuck in the thinking that I'm content with what I have right now. I've accomplished this. Maybe in business it sounds okay if you make income. But in the Christian life, that's not okay. You can't settle. You have to keep moving forward. And so don't let your past become a hindrance. And finally, we need to be determined to reach the goal. Be determined. Paul used a phrase in the passage. He says, I press on toward the goal. I pressed on. And this phrase, I press on, it gives us the picture of a person who is running a race. As he runs the race, he's looking at the finish line. And his eyes are fixed on that line. He's not looking to the left, he's not looking to the right, he's not looking at the back. And he refuses to be distracted. And what he cares about is the prize. He wants to win the prize. He's determined to win the prize. Okay, so that's what it means when he says, I press on towards the goal. I remember when, many years back, when I was still physically healthier, I tried running in a 5K run. And to tell you very frankly, it was very difficult because although back then I was physically active, I was not a runner. I was more into basketball, which you sprint, you stop, sprint, stop. Okay? But I was not into continuous running. But I was able to finish the race in around 38 minutes, which is actually slow because the winner did it in 17 minutes. Okay, so double the time. So anyway, I finished it in 38 minutes. And the thing that kept me going was the idea that I'm going to finish this race. Okay, I know I will not be first place, second place, third place, or not even in the top 10 or top 50. But I'm determined to finish the race. And that's why I was able to finish the race. And of course, got some consolation prizes for it. Okay? A certificate that said I finished the race. But the point is that I was thinking to myself, okay, I know I'm feeling the cramps. Okay, I'm not used to doing this, but I want to finish. I don't want to embarrass myself and say I dropped out of the race. I want to finish. And so Paul was the same thing. He was determined to reach his goal. Now, of course, we know that the end goal of glorifying God is something that you can only ultimately attain when you reach the end of your life and when you face the Lord in heaven. Okay. However, Paul here was saying, I will exert everything so that I can advance closer and closer to that goal. And so his desire was to bring glory to God, okay, by his intimacy with Christ. And so what it means then is that he has to do things in his life that will contribute to that goal. And he has to remove the things that will distract him. Now, as we move towards being like Christ, as we move towards glorifying Him, there are choices that we need to make. There are some determinations that we need to make so that we can move towards the direction without getting distracted, getting bogged down by things that are unimportant and trivial. For example, if I want to be used by the Lord effectively, let's say whether in full-time ministry or as a in lay ministry, I need to do the following. For example, spiritually, I have to continue to practice the discipline of reading the Word, meditating on it, praying, right? Now, if I want to live longer so that I can serve the Lord more years, more productively, then I have to take care of my physical body, right? I also have to take care of my mental development. Okay? You cannot always be preaching the same sermon. Okay? You need to keep on studying the Word and learning more. so that you can do more, right? And then of course you have to develop your emotional stability. If you knew me 20 years ago and today, you'll know that probably I'm more stable right now emotionally than before. I'm more level-headed than before. Okay. And of course, if I want to be a good testimony, I have to be better at handling my finances. Right? How can I talk to you about money if I'm in debt? Right? So, there are things that I have to do so that I can contribute to reaching the goal. I have to be determined. It's like the athlete who's aiming to win a medal. Okay? He needs to train hard, and maybe not just hard, he has to train harder. And he has to use modern techniques. Okay? And some will use science to help them be better. They have to eat more healthily. Like, for example, this is what a gymnast named Gabby Douglas in preparation for the Olympics. Okay. And you'll see that there's no McDonald's, okay, or Jollibee for that matter, and there's no Cheetos, no Coke or Sprite. All of that, it's not there, right? So she has to eat healthy. She wants to be at the optimum as an athlete. And of course, we have to learn to get enough sleep. Those are the things that they need to do. And then, as I mentioned, they need to do study motion techniques that will enhance their performance. On the other hand, athletes have to say no to the following. They cannot do late night partying. If you want to sleep early, you cannot party late. If they want to be healthy physically, they cannot drink. They cannot take illegal drugs. They cannot eat junk food. They cannot food that might contribute to developing more body fat than lean muscle. Okay. And so he needs to do all of these if he wants to be in tip-top shape and ready to compete. It's the same thing with our development as we follow Jesus Christ. I need to make the choices that will contribute to my accomplishing the greater goal of glorifying God. And so the choices that we make in this life should all contribute to the bigger goal. Not just the spiritual aspect, the reading of the Bible, the praying, the coming to worship, but it should also involve all other aspects of my humanity. And so what are some of the things that we need to do in order to become closer to the Lord, to be more effective in serving Him? We have to remember, we have to press toward the goal. And when we press toward the goal, we have to remove the things that will hinder us from reaching the goal. And so in closing, we need to ask ourselves again, what is your ultimate goal in life? Where are you headed? My prayer for all of us is that we will honor God. That will be our goal. We will glorify God by what? By our intimacy with Jesus. By that growing closeness to the Lord Jesus. And because that is the goal that we want to set in our life, then we must make choices that will contribute to reaching that goal. And we must not allow the past to hinder us. And finally, we have to be determined to finish the race. Now, as I mentioned, next week we begin our series entitled Transform. And so we are seeking to be transformed in 7 areas of life so that we can fulfill the ultimate goal of glorifying God. And so my encouragement for all of you and challenge as well is that starting next week, okay, February 4 all the way to March 18, you will be here for the Sunday messages. And not only that, you will do the daily devotions. The books are for sale outside. At only 125, that's already a steal. Okay? So get the book. Okay? If you are serious about joining the campaign and you want to do the devotional, get the book. Then of course, we encourage you to join a small group. Because as you join a small group, you'll be watching a teaching video with Rick Warren, and then we will discuss together with the group the 7 areas of life that needs transformation. Okay, so I encourage you all to be part of our Transform series. Okay, with that, let's pray. Father, thank you for how Paul has given us a model of what it means to set a goal that is lofty and yet a goal that pleases you. We pray, Lord, that this is what we also want in our lives, that we will glorify you through our intimacy with you. Father, we do pray also that as we will be starting the Transform series, may every one of us here be part through the worship service, through doing the daily devotion, and through being part of a small group. Father, we again pray that you will help each one of us, that we may be changed for your glory. We pray this right now in Jesus' name.